and welcome to day 4 of the Ragamuffin Photo Challenge, Creative Composition. Composition refers to the way the different elements of a photograph are arranged together, and photographers have loads of different tips, tricks, rules and guidelines for creating a more well-balanced and visually appealing image. I personally have my 10 favorite tools of composition that I teach the students in the 6-week Learn How to Photograph Your Pet course. Little plug there. Those are the rule of thirds, framing, leading lines, we've got negative space, filling the frame, rule of edges, rule of space, we've got symmetry, foreground elements, and using color. Today, obviously, we're not going to go into all of those, but I did want to teach you 2 really easy to use compositional rules that you can start implementing with your photography to really take it to the next level, past snapshot and to start taking portraits. So those are the rule of thirds and looking at your background. The rule of thirds is a really popular compositional technique and it's been around for ages. In fact, the earliest recorded mentioning of the rule of thirds is way back in 1797. Now, back then they were talking about painting and not photography, but the rule still applies today. With the rule of thirds, you're breaking up your image into 9 equal parts with 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. So basically you're breaking up the frame into thirds, hence the name rule of thirds. Where those vertical and horizontal lines meet is a point of interest, and it's where our eyes are naturally drawn in an image. So if you place an important element of your image, i.e. your subject, on one of those point of interests or on one of the lines, then it becomes a more well-balanced and visually appealing composition. The rule of thirds is so popular that many cameras have the option to display that grid either in your viewfinder or on the back of your screen. When you're first starting out in photography and experimenting with the rule of thirds, you might feel like you're actually making your photos more off balance if you move your pet away from the center of the frame. Don't worry, that's totally normal to feel that way, but trust me when I say using the rule of thirds is actually making your photo feel more balanced. It's playing between that positive and negative space and creating a really interesting dynamic between them.
Take this photo for example. I've positioned the dog so that his eye is directly on that point of interest. Or in this photo where I've matched up the horizon in the background of the image with the bottom horizontal line. Sometimes the rule of thirds isn't as simple to pick up on as just having the pet positioned to the side. So in this photo, for example, we're still using the rule of thirds. I cropped the image so the 2 sisters' faces were each on a point of interest. So you can use multiple points or multiple lines. Again, with this photo of the 2 doggos, they're each on a point of interest, so it creates that sense of balance in the image.
Now, can you break the rule of thirds? Absolutely. Rules are meant to be broken, especially in the world of photography. So just because there is this compositional rule doesn't mean you have to use it for every single photo. You can go the total opposite and have a really striking symmetrical image by positioning your subject right in the middle of the frame. There's all sorts of ways that you can purposely break the rule of thirds and still create a really interesting image, but I think it's important that you have an understanding of this basic compositional rule first before you start to try and intentionally break it. Now let's chat backgrounds and background clutter. It can be so easy when you're concentrating on the lighting and you're focusing and your exposure and your pet behaving and looking at the camera to totally forget to check what's actually going on in your background. But having distracting elements and clutter in the background of our photos can really ruin what could be otherwise a beautiful image. So it's important to always check to see what's going on in the background. It could be anything from
Construction, to cars and machinery, to just the random furniture and clutter that we all have in the background of our homes.
Maybe there's a bright red umbrella in the background of your photo, for example. If the photo isn't about the bright red umbrella and the bright red umbrella doesn't add anything to the image, then maybe you want to move it away from the frame because otherwise your viewer of the image is going to be distracted by the bright red umbrella. So as a photographer, you always want to be making a conscious decision to just have a scan of your background before you take an image. In this photo of Ruby, for example, that crane in the background and the cars in the distance are a little bit distracting. They're certainly not adding anything to the portrait. By shooting on a wider aperture and repositioning myself and the dog so we didn't have those distracting elements in the background, it's now a much more simplified image and we can really focus in on the dog. In this photo taken inside, there are a lot of distracting elements in the background. We've got that umbrella leaning up against the fence, the cushions are a little bit distracting, that blue bowl isn't really adding anything to the story. So again, by switching to a wider aperture and getting in close, I can blur out and remove any of those distracting elements. Remember, decluttered backgrounds don't have to be boring. I'm certainly not suggesting that you only take your photos of your pet against a white wall or against the green grass. You can have a lot of fun in the background. And you can have loads of bright, colorful, busy elements to the background as well. That's totally fine. And I love having bright colors in my photos. Just saying, if there's any elements that don't belong and they don't add anything to the image, see if you can move yourself around or adjust how you're shooting so that you minimize those distractions. Assignment 4 is creative composition, and you're going to be building on everything that you've learned in the first 3 days of this challenge, plus adding some of these compositional rules to really start to elevate your snapshots into portraits. So the first thing you're going to do with this assignment is go location scouting. I want you to find a spot around your home, in your backyard, or in a local park where you can take a photo of your pet without there being loads of distracting background elements. You may need to move furniture, tidy up some clutter, use a wider aperture. You may need to reposition yourself or your pet, or you might find that just increasing you and your pet's distance from those background elements makes them less noticeable, less of a distraction. Next, you're going to use the rule of thirds when taking a photo of your pet at this location. So remember, you're dividing your image up into equal thirds, and you are going to place your subject along one of the power lines or at one of the spots where the horizontal and vertical lines intersect. Have a play around, experiment a little bit, and then post your photo in the challenge and leave a comment on someone else's. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and I'll see you tomorrow for our last day of the challenge. It's all about angles and perspective with Get Down Low.